So recently, a friend of mine gave me this Worthington No. 5 hand plane to restore and give away to someone else. And it's a fairly cheap post-war plane. It's really not in amazing condition, but with a bit of work, it can be a decent hand plane again. But a No. 5 is really common, and well, I think I can do some better things with it. So what I decided to do is turn this into a scrub plane, particularly when I heard a friend of mine had a need for a scrub plane, and so I want to restore this and give it out to him. Now, when I say scrub plane or foreplane, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be talking about the exact same thing. It is a plane that has a cambered iron for quickly taking material off of the wood. And yes, there are specifics between a scrub plane and a foreplane, but basically they're very similar. And so for the sake of this movie, it's the same thing. So basically what I want to do is take the iron out of this and camber it and put it back in and give this thing a fairly quick cleaning. I'm not going to do a complete restore on it because really a foreplane is just something that is designed for ripping the surface off very quickly and taking a lot of material. Another common confusion with a foreplane is that it is not a number foreplane. A foreplane could be a number foreplane, but it could also be a No. 5 or a No. 6 or whatever you put a cambered iron on for taking off large amounts of material. Fore is shortened from before, so it's usually the first plane to touch the wood because you take that rough sawn material and you want to just take the surfacing off the top, get rid of any of the high stuffs from milling, and that's where a foreplane comes in. So let's take this thing apart and work on it. So first up, I want to take this apart and clean it out, and because I'm just turning it into a foreplane, I'm not looking forward, I'm not going to be completely derusting it and tearing it all apart. I do want to see the quality of what it is and what still needs some work on it. So the iron has a lot of life left on it. That should be fairly good. The iron is still stamped Worthington. If I wanted to, I could rust bath this and take it back up to its normal use. But for a foreplane, no need for that. Lever cap, good condition except for the screws now on the floor. Lever cap you don't need to do a whole lot for when you're doing with a foreplane because your chips are so large. The chances of the chip going between the iron and the cap iron, not lever cap, sorry. The chances of it going between those are so slim that it's just not worth thinking about. Also on this, I'm going to need to move the frog back because I want the mouth to be as wide as possible so that I can get large chips through it. But since I need to do that, I'm actually just going to take it off and clean out underneath. Yeah, a lot of spider webs, a lot of old sawdust, but this is actually in really good shape. So for cleaning out the body, I just use a bit of vinegar and water. You can also use soap and water, and I just like to scrub it out. The vinegar dries nicely and doesn't have a tendency to leave rust, so I like to use that. But soap and water does just as fine as long as you make sure to dry it off. Sometimes I'll wrap it around a tip of a screwdriver, make sure I get back into the corners. Now really this whole cleaning step for a scrub plane you could skip it, but for me I like to at least clean it. I know that if I take it any further it's going to become a rabbit hole and I need to tear the whole thing apart and strip the paint and repaint it, but for right now, for a scrub plane, this will work just fine. I'll clean up all the parts and then we'll get on to the main feature of addressing the iron. So basically the only difference between a standard iron and an iron for a scrub plane or a foreplane is that it is curved up on the edge as opposed to being flat and 90 degrees to the sides. And basically that is the center of a lot of discussion between what radius should that circle be. Some people say as small as 3 inches, some people say as large as 8 inches. And a lot of that depends on the width of the iron. If you get a thin iron, you're going to want a very small radius. You want a fatter iron, you need a larger radius. And everyone's going to have a different say on that. My personal opinion is that the tip of the iron needs to be about an 1/8 inch or more farther out than the far corners. So what I'll end up doing is taking a piece of paper that is roughly the width of my iron, and I'll set it out. I'll get a compass and set it at 6 inches. Then I'll put the tip right on the center top of the paper. I'll put the other tip back, center of the paper back here, and I'll just scratch an arc. Now, if I happened to have one on hand that had lead on it for a pencil, I'd probably use that, but this works fine. So then I'll take scissors and I'll cut out that arc. Just like that. I'm going to then set this onto the iron so that the front of it just touches the front of the iron. And then I'm going to take a Sharpie and I'm going to draw on that arc. Just use that as a pattern. So now I have a Sharpie mark that is the angle of that radius that I want. Now the next step, if I wasn't devoted completely to hand tools, I would take this over the grinder and I would grind that angle in. And that works great. It's fast, but I don't want to do that, so I'm actually going to use it on some sandpaper and grind that angle with a sandpaper. So let me show you how I do that. I have a piece of 80 grit sandpaper, 1.5 feet wide by 30 feet long, and it makes this fairly easy, but you can do it with a smaller piece on a piece of glass on your table or floor. I don't worry about being on granite. I'm doing a cambered iron. I'm not worrying about it being flat, so the concrete is perfectly fine. Just occasionally checking it to making sure I'm not going over the line, and keeping the bevel by holding my hand at the right angle. It really takes about 5 minutes. It's fairly quick and fairly easy, and not much slower than the grinder. I start by just working on the iron, and I actually like to hold it like this and rock it back and forth. I find to get my most control and maintain the angle the best. You can also pull it towards you. And as you do, start on this corner and then rock it away and end up on the opposite corner. And then on the next stroke, start on the opposite corner and then rock it back to the right corner, so you end up drawing like this X across on your stone. But I prefer just rocking it like this. Keeps the angle correctly. Once I get the angle, the cutting edge, fairly close to what I want, then I will come back and flatten the back, and that's just like flattening any other stone, coarse, medium, rough, and then giving it a stropping, and about 30 or 40 strokes in the stropping. I'll come back over and finish the polish on the blade itself and get that up nice and true, rocking it back and forth like that. The only major difference is when I come to the strop, I like to keep the strop always in one direction, and so I will start on one corner. I'll do 30 strokes here, I'll move over a little bit, I'll do 30 strokes there, I'll come halfway, do 30 strokes there, I'll turn it a little bit farther, 30 more strokes, and then on the final corner 30 more strokes, and then I'll just do some brushing across. Because it is rounded, you can never have all of the surfaces touching at the same time. I like to make sure that there's at least 30 strokes on any one particular spot. So let's just play around like this. And then I'll finish it up by coming across. And then you're left with this really nice polished surface that you can see yourself in. And then make sure I don't have a burr on the back. Just give that a quick scrape off. Polish that once or twice. And you can trim up some hair with that. Oh, I love that. Just can't stop myself. So you have hair. There you go. There is your sharpened iron. And now let's put it all back together and show you how it works. So there are two main differences between setting up a scrub plane and setting up a traditional number 5 or a smoothing plane. For a smoothing plane, number 1, you want that mouth to be as small as possible, and number 2, you want to put the chip breaker as close to the tip of the iron as possible, and those two things make it so you have far less tear out when you're running a plane. But for this, I don't really care about tear out. I'm going to have plenty of tear out, and I don't really matter. That doesn't matter because I'm just taking off a lot of material. So number 1, I'm going to push the frog back as far as I can so that the frog is perfectly in line with the bed, and I can actually use the little piece of sole that sticks out as a registering point for the iron. And I'm going to tighten this down just so that it is as far back as it can go without being behind the bed, but behind the sole, because I don't want the sole to be bending the iron if the sole is out in front of the frog. So I want the frog and the sole to be perfectly lined up so it's a nice straight shot all the way down. Then number 2, I'm going to move the iron back, I'm going to move the chip breaker back so that the corners of the chip breaker touch the corners of the iron. And that allows it to go much, much deeper into the wood and gives you a little bit more support from the chip breaker. So tighten that down, not caring about it being square as much as just getting that close to the iron. Then put it back together as normal, and I'll show you how to use it. So how exactly do you use a scrub plane? And a scrub plane is great for wood like this. It's been air dried outside. It's kind of darkened and gunky, and the grain's going everywhere, and also there's a good twist in the board, so it's high over here and high over here. And normally you would run this through a jointer, but I don't use powered jointers. And also this has a lot of dirt and junk in it. I don't know if you would really want to run that through an expensive jointer. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to have the iron sticking out, not quite 1/8 of an inch, somewhere between a 1/16 and 1/8. I like it to be about 3/30 seconds or so, maybe a 1/16 of an inch. And I'm going to test the grain by just kind of going slightly diagonal. I don't want to go straight across. And you can see how that's just taken up a lot of material right there. A few passes. Now, one of the other nice things about using a number 5 for your foreplane is you can see right here, these are the saw marks. This board is cupped. And so because it is long enough, it will span from this corner to this corner, and the iron won't hit this low point. If I were to do this with a number 4, the number 4 might ride through that valley and clean this out. And that really isn't good for flattening the board. So 3 or 4 passes like this, and I'll be down to some decent oak here. So let's see what it looks like. One of the things I noticed on the second pass is I'm going slightly diagonal this way. So basically the plane is oriented to run that direction. And as I do that, I'm getting some tear out because all the grain is pitching that way. Now that I've worked into it a bit, I can see that, and I'm going to turn my gaze about 45 degrees the other direction, and should end up with a much nicer surface in this pass. So let's see what happens. There, and just with a couple passes like that, I have this down to a fairly good surface. Because it is cambered, the surface is kind of wavy, but then I would come in with a number 4 with a straight iron, or a number 5 with a straight iron, and get rid of all those bumps. Once I have that done, then I can come in with a longer plane and actually joint this thing out and make it nice and flat. The whole time I'll be checking with winding sticks to make sure there's no wind in it. So. Booyah! I love this thing. It is the first plane to touch the wood, and usually it is the plane that takes off the most material. So once you learn to use one of these, it's a lot of fun and a decent workout. So yeah, that's fun. There's a quick look at how you can turn a $5 hand plane that you pick up at a garage sale into a really useful and high quality tool, even though it's a plane that most people kind of look down on. And it doesn't take that much work because you don't have to flatten much, and it's intended to do dirty work and make a mess. And so it's not something you have to worry a whole lot about being really careful about. You just get it close and it will do the work for you. I do want to say a huge thank you to Donny Carter at Woodcraftery. He gave me the idea for this, and he is the one I'm going to be sending this out to. He wants to do some flattening and doesn't want to buy a jointer, as those are fairly pricey. So this will be sent out to you here shortly. I hope you like it. So that's about it for this week. I hope you really enjoyed this video. It was a fun one to put together, and I love these quick and simple projects that can change a whole shop around. With one of these, it can save you a lot of money on a massive jointer, and just cleaning up big boards by themselves that are too big for a jointer. This actually is very, very quick at that. So I hope you like this. If you did, please hit like and think about subscribing. I want to say a huge thank you to the patrons on Patreon. You guys are absolutely amazing and a huge encouragement to me, so thank you. Also, if you did like this video, you might find out that you like one of the other videos, and feel free to check one of those out. Until next time, have a wonderful day.